Om Sadashiva Samarambam Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om. Okay, welcome everyone. We are here for the Panchadasi. And by the way, the timing thing, I did not know exactly what to do because the time has changed in Europe. And in the past, we used to have this class at 7 p.m. in Europe. And I remember that Claudia used to appreciate it big time. And we were keeping the time in Carbondale fixed because most people participating was coming from Carbondale. But now the people from there dropped out. And now the majority seems to be from Europe, okay? So I decided to stick to 8 p.m. You understand, Claudio? Unless you, Mark, and Bert tells me that, no, I would actually enjoy at 7 p.m. So is 8 p.m. okay? Or you would like me to change to 7 p.m. and then Lynn and Elizabeth would have the same timing as before?
For me, 8 is okay, but 7 actually would be better.
7 would be better for Bert. And how about you, Claudio, as well?
Yeah, better 7 for me also.
And how about Mark?
Yeah, 8's okay, but 7's okay as well, so no problem.
Okay. So can we stick to the same time as before, Lynn, for you, and Elizabeth for you, and then we're gonna change the time in the sense that we begin at 7 o'clock European time, and then next week is gonna be exactly like it was in the previous weeks. Okay, 1 hour earlier for you two, for Elizabeth and Lynn. Okay, so I will fix it for next week. And there's going to be the same time for Lynn and Elizabeth and a different time for Claudio, Mark, and Gert. Done deal. So
And what about Thursday?
Thursday, the same thing. Oh, that's a good question. Thursday, I mean, I wouldn't know what to say about Thursday because Thursday we meet. What time is European time on our Thursdays?
4 in the afternoon.
I guess. So does that make much of a difference?
No,
for me
not.
For me, it's 3 o'clock. It's also because if in the States, it's better to stay 1 hour before. Here,
Yeah,
for me,
I
3
think
o'clock
so,
is okay.
because otherwise it would be a little bit too early for Elizabeth.
Okay, so maybe it's too early. So if it's too early, it's okay. 4 o'clock for me, no problem.
So we keep it 4 o'clock, and then now if we bring it 3 o'clock, we keep the same timing. It's the same reasoning, the same time for Elizabeth and Lynn. If we bring it to 3 o'clock, 3 p.m. on Europe. So would you prefer we keep the same time as before for you, Elizabeth, not to make any confusion?
No, it will be okay. I'll check up with Lynn anyhow. She has a little different time than I have.
Yes, I know. And
I'll
Lynn,
talk to you.
Lynn,
okay?
And how about you? Can we keep the same time as before for Thursday's class as well?
Yes.
I mean, I get up at 4 or 5 a.m. So
yeah,
anytime is good.
Yeah.
Me too.
Me too.
I get up between 4 and 5. Okay, so I will send an email for Thursday, changing only the timing for Europe. Instead of 4 p.m., it's going to be 3 p.m. and we keep the same for myself and for our girls here. And we begin today Panchadasi. You like that one, eh, Lynn? Yeah. So we did last week our class on the mind. Okay, and unfortunately I did not record it. It was a nice class and I regret I made that mistake and I'm going to, if you allow me, I'm going to do a 15-minute summary so that for the web, it does not jump like that. So we look into the mind in this, this is the second chapter, of course, differentiation, I guess, of the elements and so on. Yeah, the differentiation of the elements, and Maya, the beautiful, intelligent ignorance. So we have covered quite some ground on this book already. And as I said, we did look into the mind. And let me go back to where I was here. So the mind has is the 11th sense organ. That is a concept that is easily understandable from the moment, from the angle of looking at the mind and see that the sense organs by themselves, they cannot really have an experience or a cognition. You understand? So we have this sense organs, but yet in order to capture an object, the property of an object, and turn that into an experience / knowledge, we need the mind. Therefore, the mind is kind of the 11th instrument, or 11th sense organ, or the 6th sense organ, because when we are after experience and knowledge, we are using our receiving aspect, our sense, organs of perception. So we are receiving the stimulus coming from the field, and we have 5 channels, and then we have the mind doing its job, which is to integrate those 5 sense perceptions into one single experience, and then from there activating the intellect to bring about knowledge. So it is the 6th sense organ, or the 11th, if we bring into the equation the 5 organs of actions, because knowledge usually involves receiving and responding, the interaction, interactions through the 10 sense mechanisms we have, reception and action, plus the mind coordinating both sides of this interaction. So, and then we know that it depends on the organ sense and the organs of actions to function in this relation to external object. This mind is also called the indweller, or the internal organ, antahkarana. So we saw that it directs traffic. We can only think one thought at a time, and we can only perceive one stimuli at the time. And we do so. I mean, actually, we can perceive several stimulus, because the same object can have a smell, a touch, a sound, and a color, and a shape, and so on. So, but we cannot really access, everything through one sense organ. So one sense organ has to pick up on these stimuli, and then the other one. So these channels, of reception, they are opening and closed, so that the mind all the time is doing its job of collecting data, and bringing about this experience. So it does that job beautifully, as we know. We can see it happening moment to moment. We know that the mind is located in the subtle body, and the subtle body is located in the causal body. The mind inquires into the merits and defects of objects perceived by the sense. So the function of the mind, another function of the mind, is to get a feel of every object. And once it gets in contact, before it comes to the point of collecting data or bringing about a certain understanding about what is this object of contact, the first thing it does, is to doubt or question, and it does so by scanning the object according to my likes and dislikes. So it's going to inquire or investigate whether I like merits, and the fact is like, oh, is this something that I'm going to enjoy or not? Is it something that's going to be favorable to my peace of mind and so on, my security? So it's all the time looking, checking. And actually, the mind is the first aspect of the intellect or the subtle body that is already doing a sort of discrimination. But unfortunately, on that level of mental, emotional level, the discrimination is poor, because it's based only on, do I like it or do I not like it? It's not a sophisticated discrimination. It's just like, okay, no, I like it, I know I don't like it. So it's going to do that. And then it says here that sattva, rajas, and tamas cause the mind to undergo various modifications. We know that. We experience those flux, constant flux of mental modification, mental conditions. Irritation comes, and then clarity comes, and then tamas comes, and all those things are common in every human being. Even the yanis, they go through those fluctuations, not as much, but they do as well. It also doubts, as I already covered. It emotes in the sense that life is a game to be played not from the receiving end or receptive or perceptive angle, but a response has to be given back to the field. So in order to activate the ego and the intellect and the ego, the intellect and the ego is more or less the same thing. So in order to activate that, to determine and come up with a choice, a decision, it requires a certain emotion. And the emotion is there being provided by the mind. And the emotion is just like, I like it and I don't like it. And you just go and get it, or you just go and avoid it, Mr. Ego. The mind is going to immediately send that signal, emotional signal, that is going to motivate the ego, the intellect/ego, to do something about that. Of course, if the intellect is the ego is too tamasic, he's going to say, oh, whatever, que será, será. Tomorrow maybe I will think about that. And the mind modifies according to the gunas. No attachment is forgiveness, generosity is an influence of sattva operating the mind. Rajas is going to create activity, pressure. It's very uncomfortable, and it's going to generate desires and fears all the time, especially desires, go and get it, go and get it. And fear sometimes has a large, dense element of rajas as well, because as we know, when we are on the fight-flight mode, there is a lot of fear, and immediately we have this rush of rajas, and then they will say, just fly, So there is also an element of rajas involved when we are really afraid. Lethargy, confusion, procrastination, and so on are the result of tamas influence in the mind. When sattva functions, merit is acquired, good results. We get good results, good punya, and good circumstance, and so on. When raja functions, we get in trouble. Tamas is not much conducive to action, and then one would say, okay, and then if I have a tamasic mind, I solve the problem at the root, because if I don't produce actions, my actions are being inexistent, it will not produce merits, neither the merits, either or the merits, because I'm not doing any action. So if there are no actions, there are no results of actions. We'll say, okay, I think the safe way to play life is not doing. I remember my my old days with Papaji, some people had this theory, this philosophy. No, I'm lazy. I'm into not doing. And I knew that the guys were in trouble financially, but it's a choice. But Thomas is a laziness, procrastination. It somehow it produces demerit because life was designed for us to respond to the stimulus, unless our response is a very elevated one, because the highly elevated people, they don't care for life, which is different from the tamasic samsari that cares for life but does not have energy to go and play it by the rules. Okay, so a yogi or a highly elevated spiritual being, it's going to again and again see the life without much interest in the objects of consumption, without interest in experience, and yet he's going to be giving back to the field again and again its own peace and radiance. Okay, it's totally different phenomenon. Huh? But what Thomas is not going to produce karmic merits, but definitely in most cases for the samsaris, the tamasic samsara is going to produce the merit, because we can think by action, but we also seen by inaction or by omission, but not being responsible, not responding, not fulfilling our rules, and so on. So all of that can bring about what I often refer as karmic indigestion, when things begin accumulating, and then when you see you are just suffering from indigestion, not processing karma appropriately. The ego is, or the I saw. Did we cover the ego last week, Claudio? No? Okay. The ego. So we looked into the mind, the first function of the subtle body, yeah? And then let me see if they are going to break down the subtle body into intellect and ego, or just ego representing the intellect as well. Let me see a little bit more in front. Yeah, it's comprised there, and then it's going to jump for the self. So we have the mind, which is the emotional, wavering, volatile aspect of our mind, of our subtle body, and then we have the ego. The ego is the I thought, I am experiencing, and I am responding, I am doing, and I am determining, and we go to the extension of belief that I am thinking, although deliberate thinking is rare. Most of the time our vasanas are providing us with thoughts, but sometimes we're in the office and we need to bring our mind, and, oh no, I don't like to be bookkeeping, but I have to do, it's part of my life to do a little bit of book, and then we deliberate, have to bring the mind to think about numbers, for example. But I think, okay, the ego is going to say, I am, I exist, and I think, I decide, I determine, and I do. This is the agent, the experiencing entity that acts out the modifications of the mind. It's going to act out the interaction with the life. And this interaction is mostly influenced by its mental condition, because the way we respond to the field of action, the field of interaction, is going to say much about our mental condition. Because when we go about smoothly and elegantly and with clarity and assertiveness and so on, and then we know that I'm acting out in a way that I'm responding in harmony with everything, and I'm creating a friendly environment around myself. So the modifications of the mind, they are very, very instrumental for the way we will respond or act or interact. The ego is nothing but but reflected consciousness. Chida basa is the chida basa, chit, yeah, chit, okay. Consciousness, and basa, which is reflection. So chit, reflected chit, reflect consciousness or reflect awareness. So this is the Jiva Atma. And I like the expression of Jiva Atma because we have the Jiva, but we have the Atma, and the Jiva we can look into and see this is the substantial nature of the Jiva. And Atma goes for its consciousness, although reflected is the sentient or the thinking or the I am aspect of the Jivatma, or the Atma. I am, I exist, I and G. So there is consciousness, there is chit at play. Chit is very nature of Brahman, is my nature, and here it manifests as what? The ego, the chit, knowingness, the ability, the capacity to know, to perceive, and to determine, and to consciously interact. So this is the chit, and chit is consciousness. Sat Chit Ananda, existence, consciousness of nature, of limitless nature. So the Chitabhasa principle, it identifies with the body-mind complex. Oh, how sad. Why does that happen? I keep wondering why, at least here in this planet, we know there is this hardware identification with the physical bodies, and we can forgive the animals, the other animals, because they don't have an intelligent intellect. So they are somehow subconsciously identified with their physical body. That's why they fight for their life. They never, if there is some other bigger animal coming to eat a smaller animal, the smaller animal never says, oh yes, here I am, I'm sacrificing myself for you. No, it's going to put up a fight or just fly fast. Why? Because they have a certain love for their beingness, for their existence, but it's unconscious, it's all mechanical. And then in the case of the human jiva, there is an identification with the body-mind to the point that we are going to fight for our lives because we believe that my body is my life. So we are desperate about losing this body because we believe I am this body. So the identification is big in spite of my intelligent intellect that does not seem to be intelligent enough to understand its own fundamental free nature as consciousness. And Vedanta is only about that. It's about trying to help us to understand our true nature, because only consciousness, only in consciousness as consciousness, we can deal with this crazy world in which our diversities have been piling up, as we grow older, especially, Okay, it identifies the ears listen, but they do not say, I am listening. Isn't it interesting? All the five senses, they are doing their jobs, but they never say, oh, I am the responsible here. I'm smelling, I'm touching, I'm getting the texture here. And I'm the listener here. So they never own the experience. The sense organs, they don't own. The organs of action, they don't own the action either. They are just instruments. So there is someone behind it, which is the integrator of these 10 organs, 5 organs of reception and the action, this aspect, the intellect, this I thought, that it becomes conscious in the case of a human being. The animals, they don't have a conscious I thought. They have a subconscious sense and love for their own existence, for their own survival. But we have a conscious I thought, and then we see I and that, I and these, I, subject, object, jivatma, and the other objects around it. So all these sense organs do not own the experience. But the ego, that the one that integrates, the mind is going to integrate, but then there is something, the mind itself, it's overreactive. It only knows what I like and what I don't like. You know? But the mind is like a little child that is not yet fully realized as a human being. It's just running for an ice cream or escaping, having to eat some boiled vegetables. So, but the intellect is a more complex kind of phenomenon, because it's fully developed as I am the boss here, and I am the king in the castle here. So all these instruments, all these parts, and this and that, this all belongs to me. I am the thing here. And then it's only the mind who is going to say, yes, I listen. I walk, I talk, I smell, I touch. The mind is going to own things. And the mind is not going to own things. The mind is going to perceive things as friendly or unfriendly, but the ego that comes right after the mind is going to say, by the way, I am the owner of all of this here, and I am the boss, and I am the one who is smelling, listening, touching, and seeing, and so on. So it's a very, very interesting phenomenon, because it's beautiful. It's a reflection of consciousness that manifests itself as an individual consciousness, and the individual consciousness is chit, which is now individualized and says, I am, I exist. And then immediately it tends to identify with the body, and immediately it owns every experience and knowledge and actions as my knowledge, my experience, my actions, my results of actions, my karma, my vasanas, and so on. This is the ahamkara, the part of the subtle body that owns actions and owns experience, owns everything, owns the sense organs and everything. At this stage, the teaching assumes that the ego is actually conscious, that it is an actor rather than a seeming actor. So is the ego conscious, or is it not conscious? So we know that there is such a thing as human consciousness, and very few people in the world knows this distinction between pure limitless consciousness and human consciousness. So the ego is conscious. Yes, it is conscious, okay? But it's not really independently conscious. The ego is conscious. It is it's shining with consciousness, producing the experiencing, knowing entity. Consciousness is not a I am experience entity. Through the ego, it becomes an experience in knowing, and it is conscious. It is conscious. Its consciousness is all the time subject to the influence of its gunas, which is the building blocks of its own configuration. So it has a feeling of instability, right? But it has consciousness shining there. That's why it can understand. Aham Brahmasmi or Tattvamasi. I, this conscious human consciousness, am that limitless consciousness. So because we have this consciousness shining there, okay, conditioned by the condition of the reflecting medium, the subtle body, the substantial aspect of the ego. So at this stage, the teaching assumes that the ego is actually conscious, that it is an actor rather than a seeming actor. So it is an actor on the stage of life, and the ego is conscious, the ego is seemingly conscious, it's a seemingly an actor. It is everything in these teachings. Once we begin to analyze, what if we are looking into the self-consciousness, and then we don't need to deal with this apparently, seemingly, apparently, and seemingly. So when we are dealing with Mithya, which is 90% of the teaching of Vedanta, everything is seemingly or apparently, okay? Because everything is just a superimposition or an appearance on consciousness, no, in consciousness. It cannot really own anything because it's not actually conscious. So it owns due to this fundamental avidya, ignorance in respect to its fundamental true nature. Because of this ignorance, because of this avidya in regards to its fundamental true nature, it's going to do what? It's going to own the body and own the actions of the body. And this is unavoidable, okay? It is one of my questions, you know, is there a place in the universe in which there are creatures, intelligent organisms, living organisms, intelligent living organisms, you know, shining with the same chit, with the same consciousness, but free from this identification with matter, you understand? We are made of spirit and matter, but somehow when it manifests itself, and this consciousness manifests itself as in duality, it tends to forget its nature, its true nature as the spirit, as consciousness, you know? And is there a place in the universe where these intelligent living organisms may know the truth? You know, this is something that I'm curious about. I have never been involved with mysticism or any of that, but I would like to visit one of those places where people, you know, are mostly, they know the truth. Yeah? So, ignorance calls the self in the guise of the ego to own this or that. The teaching assumes that the inquirer is not ready to understand that he or she is the self. So the ego needs to be identified and accepted as a conscious doer, enjoyer entity. So this is irrelevant for us. We are a small group. I don't care much for anybody there in the internet because these videos that we do have basically no exposure. It's not really appealing to anybody because we talk Vedanta on a certain level that is not appealing in general. So we know we are all limitless, free consciousness, and we have a little problem here and there because the consciousness we are is still here and there fighting some old vasanas of identification with the physical body and the mind and so on. But we know that Aham Brahmasmi, I am that consciousness and I am free. Huh? So it does not really apply to us, this remark. We know that the ego is just our secondary apparent nature, and it has its purpose. It serves, in Mithya, it serves the purpose, you know, of collecting data, experience, wisdom, and growth. So we don't have a problem with that. We still enjoy this opportunity. We have appreciation for this magic show and so on. And we know that it's just an actor, and here and there we need to come to the teachings of Vedanta to remember not to take this actor or not to let this actor, you know, to go out too far out there, forgetting that it's just a player. That in truth, Ishvara is doing all players, and in truth, Ishvara and all jivas are but consciousness, limitless consciousness. So this ego is evident it is evident, no, it is evident that the clearly discernible sense stimuli are caused by the 5 elements. So now we are changing the subject here. Before we are talking about the ego. No, it's still under the title, the ego. Let's see where it goes. It is evident that the clearly discernible sense stimuli are caused by the 5 elements. Does anybody, is this something foreign or strange for anyone of you? That the sense stimulus are caused by the 5 elements. So we have the creation. The creation comes from the 3 energies, and the 3 energies, they unfold to become the 5 subtle elements. And then out of the 5 subtle elements, so Ishwara, this great intelligence, it begins developing what? The sense organs, okay? The sense stimulus are caused by the 5 elements. But before we have the 5 elements, and then the 5 elements are going to bring about what? The 5 types of stimulus that are going to require the 5 channels or sense perceptions, that are come. We receive these stimulus, and some of sound, some of smell, some of hear and seeing, and so on. So all of these are coming from where? We have to remember the teachings, the 5 elements, and the attributes or the properties of each one of the 5 elements that are going to bring about, okay, a certain properties, and the properties are going to provide or become or develop the sense perception, the organs of receiving that. So we have the 5 elements, subtle elements, and then they start emitting or transmitting or radiating its properties, and these properties are going to be developing simultaneously the instrument to receive this phenomenon. It's all part of the very nature of the elements. Each one of the elements is going to produce, to give birth to one of these 5 kinds of stimuli, which is going to bring the birth of the 5 sense organs, okay? So it is evident that the clearly discernible sense stimuli are caused by the 5 elements with the help of scriptural texts and reasoning. It can be seen that the subtle elements are the basis of the sense and the mind. So not only the sense organs, but even the mind. Okay, the mind is all born out of these 5 subtle elements. Okay, and the mind is very subtle. The intellect is even more subtle, meaning to say that it's more sattva. It means to say there's 5 subtle elements. There is most portions are the sattva portions of these 5 elements. They go to create the mind, and even more sattva parts of each one of the subtle elements come to make the intellect. So did I draw a good picture of this display? Understood, Claudio? The phrase mind over matter implies that mind is consciousness, not matter. But the mind is inert matter. It has no consciousness of its own. Again, the same argument. So there are a lot of confusion and misunderstandings about the nature of consciousness, about the nature of the mind and the nature of consciousness. And in the world, people believe that consciousness is the mind is consciousness. So, and then we say mind over matter, it implies, there is an implied meaning that we are meaning to say mind is consciousness and matter is energy or slash matter, you know, is phenomenal, and mind is something non-phenomenal. It implies that mind is consciousness, not matter. But as we know, the mind is inert. Yeah? So, and this is very interesting again, especially strange for people not familiarized with Vedanta, because how can the mind and the intellect fundamentally be inert energy, inert subtle matter? And that takes us back again to what aspect of the mind you're talking about, the substantial aspect or the conscious aspect of the mind? Huh? So here, the discussion here goes to the substantial aspect of the mind is inert matter. The subtle body is made out of subtle energies. Huh? And all these energies, they are fundamentally inert, okay? So the mind over matter means to say the subtle aspect of my subtle body has to have power over the lower aspect or the denser aspect. So the mind should be, you know, it better be the ruler of this body-mind complex. Why? Because it contains more sattva, and it's clever, much wiser and intelligent. And then the mind, the intellect should be able to say, no, you are not going to be eating only potato chips and Coca-Cola, drink Coca-Cola, although you have a huge vasana for that. Huh? Because I am the boss here. Huh? I am the intellect, and then mind, intellect over the denser aspect of the physical body who is craving for something. Huh? So mind over matter, it's a misunderstanding because it takes mind to be consciousness, and in creation there are only two principles operating, which is consciousness and matter. Huh? Consciousness and matter and invisible matter, meaning to say energy, is subtle matter. Huh? And dense energies is, we call matter, huh? Is gratified energies, you know, energies, densified energies, they become visible to our sense organs, you know, so to our eyes and so on, and other organs as well. But fundamentally, the mind is inert matter, energy. It has no consciousness of its own, as we have already established before. It somehow, it's not independently conscious because it depends on another factor for this mental, intellectual consciousness, individual consciousness. No? The mind, the intellect, is not independently conscious. Yeah? That's the point. It does not have its own source of consciousness, meaning to say its consciousness is not self-contained, is not self-generated. You understand? Its consciousness belongs to what? To our fundamental nature as Brahman. So there is only one source of consciousness, and somehow consciousness being all pervasive, it has a sympathy or affinity with the intellect or the subtle body, and then it shines, producing the ahamkara, the conscious, individual conscious entity who says, I am that, I am, I experience. This ego sense to be conscious because it's made of a large proportion of sattva guna, a subtle material, which reflects awareness. So we have the subtle body, and again, what is the ego? What is the jiva? When we look into these teachings on the entry level, often we're gonna see statements that say oh yeah, the ego is the subtle body. The jiva is the subtle body. Yeah. But the subtle body is inert matter. And the ego is conscious. It's a conscious principle, conscious being. Yeah? The ahamkara enjoys chit. So how can it just be conscious inert matter? You know, if I am inert matter, I cannot experience chit, consciousness. No? So my substantial nature as the reflecting medium is inert matter, but I am a conscious being. What it means, you know? I am not the instrument by which I am conscious of my environment and myself. I am this reflected consciousness. I am this consciousness that depends on the reflecting medium, reflecting medium to produce this ahamkara. And the ahamkara can understand that in which way it is consciousness, in which way it is not consciousness. It is not consciousness because its conscious experience is still depends on the original consciousness. But it is knowledge, you know, it's conscious knowledge. Yeah? Once it is hard and clear and fast, once it's understood, it's conscious knowledge, you know, it's no longer dependent on the original consciousness, because knowledge is that which is always good. Once you know, you know. Then this reflect consciousness, which is the intellect, which is the jivatma, which is the ahamkara, this one is consciousness, okay? And it is consciousness because of my subtle body, which is very, very sattvic, very reflective, so that brings about consciousness, and then through this reflect consciousness, I'm able to understand, you know, that, and by the way, this is my true nature. This is my true nature. So I needed the reflecting medium. And of course, without consciousness, there is nothing to be known. I need consciousness, I need the reflecting medium. And now I understand that Tattvamasi, I am that consciousness. And then once this knowledge is properly integrated, digested, you know, and internalized, and then one does not need to think about that anymore, you know, because knowledge was gained. You understand? So it is just to take this conversation a little bit deeper than those pages we are covering. Our subtle body is rich on sattva guna, and it produces this reflect consciousness, no? And therefore I can understand that the nature of the reflection of this consciousness is fundamentally the same nature as the unreflected consciousness. And if we go further in front of this text, we will see that actually the Jivatma is a combination of original consciousness and reflect consciousness, both mixed together, you know, because reflection, original consciousness is pervading everything, and then it hits this reflecting medium, it produces the I thought, but the I thought is still being pervaded by limitless original consciousness. So we are a mixture of both, and that's what allows us as well to understand our true nature. We know that the physical body is matter because we perceive it as matter. You cannot prove that mind is matter because you cannot perceive it. Yeah, invisible matter. Huh? Invisible matter is something that requires a subtle mind to understand as matter. Huh? But you can know that it's matter by inference. Let's see the logic here. If it were not matter, it would have to be consciousness, because consciousness and matter are the only two categories in existence. Yeah. So we know that the mind is matter by inference here, by understand. There are different ways we could infer that the mind, is matter, but we are not going to get into that. If you are not matter, it would be consciousness, because there is only consciousness and matter into existence. If it is consciousness, it will never die. There we go. I was thinking more on those lines. So mind cannot be consciousness, understand? Because consciousness is that which is always ever present and never changing. And mind is a changing phenomenon, and it does not exist through the three states. There is a state in which the mind disappears, which is the deep sleep state. And then the mind cannot be consciousness. So the mind not being consciousness, it can only be energy. It's easy to understand the mind as energy. Everything below the line of Maya is energy. Okay, so energy is going to grossify to different densities or different levels. And the mind is matter, and we know this also because it depends on material elements. Beautiful logic. So it belongs to the same order of reality, which means matter. If we stop feeding the mind with food, what happens? The mind gets weaker, 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 and weaker, tamasic, and then it fades, it dies with the physical body. So it depends on the physical body. It depends on food. Without them, it will die. Another logic here, it's also subject to change depending on what you put in your mouth. Again, the same order of reality, So depending on what I put in my mouth, my mind, if I take some drugs, if I take ayahuasca, like in Brazil, it's so popular here. Every spiritual group I meet here have a background on ayahuasca. This shows that the mind is on the same level or order of reality of the physical world. It's influenced by matter. If it is influenced by matter, and then it belongs to the same order of reality. Understand? It's so, well, the order of reality is that in which things are again and again impacting and influencing one another, okay? Because they are the same frequency, the same order of reality. So if we have two different orders of reality, or even we see Nietzsche order of reality, there are some different suborder. There is, for example, Ishvara, and then there is Jiva. And then there are two suborders of reality that does not really affect one another. Ishvara is not affected by whatsoever Jiva thinks, feels, or does. And Jiva is going to be affected by its paramita karma, but there are two suborders of reality. They don't, you look at the dream state and the awake state. Again, they are two suborders of reality, means to say what happens in the dream state is not going to affect my awakening state, right? So, but the mind is influenced by matter, and it shows that it belongs to the same order of reality. If it were in a different order, it would not be a fact. The mind changed. That's, I was going on those lines. The mind is changing all the time. It can only be matter, because matter or mithya the phenomenal objects of meeting, they are in constant flux of change, modification again and again and again. And the mind is changing and modified again and again. So definitely the mind is not consciousness, but a good mind, a mind that is contemplative, reflective, sattvic, this mind is what we need to extract and understand the other order of reality, which is Satya as my true nature / identity. The statement, the subtle body, the subtle elements are the base of the senses, and the mind indicates the fact that creation is a projection. The subtle body, the subtle elements are the base of the sense and the mind. Yeah. So it indicates that the creation is a projection. It means to say it evolves from the subtle to the gross. So the universe, it begins from the macrocosm causal body, which is something even more invisible than thought, emotion, energy. It's extremely subtle, it's a sort of energy as well, but it's even subtler. So everything comes from the subtler to grossify. It comes as the three gunas, and then ideas in consciousness, and then the elements develop, and then the stimulus coming from the elements radiate from, and then the sense organ, and then we have a complete creation when intelligent organisms appear to experience and know the creation. So it evolves. So because it evolves, it's said to be a projection. A projection is something that appears from its potential seed formation, meaning to say it does not exist, and then it appears. Does not exist and appears. Is the extremely subtle Maya, the fundamental Prakriti, and then because it begins from the three gunas and the subtle elements are the building blocks that are going to bring about the complete creation. This view is completely opposite of the material view that the senses and mind evolved from matter. So we don't need to go there. We know that things in the world are completely upside down. How can consciousness evolve from matter if matter does not contain consciousness? Matter is inert, does not contain consciousness. Matter is not aware of us. Anything that's here is not aware of me. A chair is not aware of me, so matter. So no, the brain is a special kind of matter. No, the brain is just inert matter, a little subtler than the bones and the flesh, the muscles. So it's an absurd. There is a deep-seated notion that the body sustains life when, in fact, consciousness sustains the body. So the body is the one who is producing my life. I am what I am because the body is producing this consciousness and this life and everything. Oh, yeah, it's my body. Oh, my body. You are my best friend. No, because everything is coming from you. No. And consciousness brings about the body and sustains the body, and in due time, let the body go. The verse 20, whatever is perceived by the senses and experienced by the organs of action. So we are playing with the field, we are perceiving and responding through the organs of actions, And then it's known by the mind, and the intellect is referred to as idam, this. So in the Upanishad text that follows, the discrimination begins with the definition of this, or idam, this. I and this, aham and idam. Eu e aquilo, falando em português, I and that, I and things around myself here, And this is nicely put in this verse. Whatever is perceived out there, it is perceived through the sense, and it's experienced through the interaction of the organs of actions, of stimuli and response. And then it's known by the mind and the intellect. And any and everything is referred by the Upanishad as idam, this, meaning to say object, other things other than the knower, the experience, than I. The discrimination begins with this definition of this, meaning to say the object, the most important tool of Vedanta is Viveka, as we know, a discrimination between the true I, and idam, this and that, the object. And then this discrimination becomes more subtle when we have to push the mind and the intellect into idam, this as well, because even the intellect is subject to change. Its substantial nature is subject to constant change according to the proportions of the three gunas. And then with intellect, we need to keep it in balance and somehow keep it, clear and knowing that it's going to fluctuate. And then we can have a good instrument to make a discrimination between subject and object, aham and idam. So anything that is objectified, perceived, seen, known by me cannot be me, but it is idam, an object. And I am what? I am the seer, I am the knower. I utilize the intellect because it's my instrument of knowledge. I utilize the sense organs as my instruments of knowledge, but I'm none of these. These are instruments, and that is where this discrimination becomes subtle, as we know. Okay, this is a nice conversation, and next week we're gonna enter into the self. When we talk about the self, there is not much we can say about it, but then we're gonna have to go into the good work of discriminating the seer from the seen and the knower from the known and so on. So do we have any comments, any inputs, any complaints? Okay. I'm glad we record today. We did a little summary, and we meet again soon. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purna Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you, my friends. We meet again soon. Namaste. Love you. Arrivederci.
Thank you.
Thank you.